All right, so what is going to happen in the 2023 real estate market? I can only speak of my local market here specifically. We're looking at King County in Washington. So my overall prediction is that it's going to be a more balanced market and slight appreciation. Some of the things that we're going to look at is buyer demand, interest rates, the Fed, inflation, the amount of sales, the inventory, and what it's going to be like mentally for buyers and sellers in this market. So first off, let's talk about the inventory. Of course, real estate is always supply and demand, and so the inventory is the supply. So it's a very important ingredient in what the real estate prices do. So right now in King County, we have a lot more inventory than we used to have, but that's not because we're having a ton more listings actually come out. In this month of November, we had less inventory come new to the market than we did last year. It's just that houses are taking a lot longer to sell, and so they're kind of accumulating from the previous months so that we have more months of inventory and overall more inventory. We had about 3,000 houses for sale this last month overall, compared to about 1,000 last year. So overall, I think this trend will continue. I think it's going to be a little bit harder to sell a house for a little bit of time. And so we should have just overall higher levels of inventory in general, and houses will still take a little bit longer to sell. One thing I want to touch on when it comes to inventory is things like foreclosures. So I know a lot of people that went through the previous housing crash, the main driver was unsound lending practices, and people were upside down on their mortgages a lot of the times, and they were doing a lot of foreclosures. So everyone was trying to sell and get out from underneath, being upside down in their mortgage. I see this time around a more of a slight recession and significantly different than last time, especially when it comes to foreclosures. So we're in a position here in this area where there is significant amounts of equity. Most homeowners in this area have a lot of equity, 20, 30, 40, 50%. A lot of people own it in cash. The only people that are really in any sort of fear of being upside down is someone who bought literally in the spring market of 2022. That's really it. Because otherwise they still have equity. Even if you look at buying a house in late 2021 compared to the prices now, they haven't gone down. So everyone has equity, so it's not going to be a fire sale type situation where everyone is trying to get rid of their house as soon as they possibly can. So inventory wise, not going to be a lot of foreclosures. Most people have equity. The whole forbearance thing from COVID that everyone was worried about is turned out to not be an issue. People are restructuring loans, and everyone is, for the most part, okay. And so we're not seeing a flood of inventory due to the foreclosures. The second part I have on inventory in general is that people are staying in their homes a little bit longer. We actually have less new inventory coming to the market right now, as I mentioned before. And I think this trend is going to continue due to the fact of interest rates. So a lot of people who have owned their house for quite a bit of time, they either bought it when the low interest rate or they refinanced their loan when these interest rates were so low. So if you can imagine someone who has a house that, they have a few $100,000 of equity, maybe they're at 50% equity, and they have a 2.7, 2.8 interest rate, it's a lot more difficult to decide to sell that house, get out of that interest rate, and then go ahead and buy their next house in a 6 or 7% interest rate environment. The affordability is so much different from their current payment with the house that they bought a long time ago for so much less money with that lower interest rate compared to what they're going to get today with the higher interest rate. So because of that, we are overall going to see less sales. So I don't see a lot of inventory coming to the market other than the usual amount of inventory from people who always need to sell. So again, just to kind of reiterate why I'm talking about this, I don't think that we're going to get loads and loads of inventory due to foreclosures or really any other outside event that's going to bring just every house for sale and just completely turn over this market. That I do not see happening. So next up, that covers the inventory, the supply part. As far as demand goes, that's going to be buyers' ability and affordability to purchase the houses that are on the market. So interest rates. So first, let's back up and talk about the Fed and inflation. So as of shooting this video, this is December right now, and we just got the first sneak peek that what the Fed is doing is actually working. So the last CPI rating in mid-November had some really good signs. The same day that came out, interest rates went down about a half a point from 7 to 6.5. Closer to about a week ago, Chairman Powell had another little meeting, not the federal fund rate meeting, but just did kind of some announcements, and his whole demeanor and kind of his projections and things got a lot more soft. So he's a lot less aggressive because of some of the new information that they got from the CPI rating for the inflation. So all things are pointing to, good signs as far as what the Fed's doing in regards to inflation. So my prediction for inflation is that we are going to see a slow decline in inflation. JP Morgan had a really great article that I read that was very insightful. They think that we're going to get down to about the 3% range of inflation by next September. And so, of course, the Fed's target is 2% inflation rate. So I think as they see the trend going down, they are going to move away from quantitative tightening. Quantitative tightening is them increasing their interest rates and selling off their balance sheet in some cases. So the December CPI rating will be a really good indicator. So maybe I'll make another video after that one because that's coming up next Tuesday. So pretty soon here. But if that is a good reading and things are looking like they're working, then the Fed is probably going to back off their plan of quantitative tightening. I do expect they're going to continue to raise their interest rates, the federal fund rate, until they get closer to their target. But I think that they will soften up because they are in fear of over tightening. They don't want to crash the market. So we do expect, most experts expect in December, we're going to have a 0.5 rate increase as opposed to 0.75. So my prediction for the Fed is going to be 0.5, 0.25, 0.25 for about a quarter, and then they will, I think, flatline and stop quantitative tightening. In other words, stop raising their interest rates. At that point, maybe it's around the springtime if I had to make a prediction. That will be good for the markets. People will react. They're going to say, hey, we're not tightening anymore. So it'll kind of give some buyer sentiment. It'll increase buyer sentiment. It'll make them feel a little bit better about what they're doing. Now, when that happens and they've stopped tightening, they're just going to coast at whatever interest rate they're at that point, I think, for a little bit of time to see how that reacts, or excuse me, to see how inflation and the CPI rate actually react to that. And then I predict, inflation is going to continue to go down. Once they get too close to their target and they know that it's working, then I think they're going to lower interest rates. So interest rates overall, 2023, for mortgage rates, I think that they will go in line with Fed rates. I think they'll kind of hover where they're at right now. Right now, they're in the low sixes. And I think that they'll be between 5.5 and 6.5 over the first quarter, give or take. Once we start seeing good signs, which is my prediction, then I think they will come down. I'm not sure if they'll come down as soon as summer or not when this good news kind of starts to happening, or if it'll be a delayed effect and a lag measure and it might happen towards the end of the year. But I do predict that they will go down. When they do, it'll be a time when I think the market reacts pretty aggressively and we start seeing appreciation, go up pretty quickly from there. All right, so we got the supply and the demand, interest rates, CPI rating, inflation, all that stuff. So what does it mean for actual prices? Well, if you follow along with kind of how everything else is going, that should tell you. So I think spring is going to be a softer market, slower market. There's going to be less sales in general, just less houses that are going to be sold. But there are going to be people who are buying and selling, of course. So I think prices may trend down the first few months of 2023. At a small percentage, maybe 1% each month. And then I think we will see a little bit of a spike in the springtime just because of the seasonality of it. I think that, buyer sentiment will be a little bit better because I think by then we'll have seen some good signs in the CPI ratings and the Fed's communication and kind of what's going on that maybe things are going to get better. So I think that buyers will be interested in buying in the springtime. And of course, we'll get more inventory at that point too. So I think it'll be a relatively hot spring, nothing like the spring we just had or even the past two springs when it was kind of a crazy bidding war. I think it'll still be a pretty good market, but much more balanced this time in the spring than the last few springs. And then I think it'll, in the summertime, kind of stay pretty balanced, and I think that we'll have some price appreciation in that springtime, then maybe flatline. And overall, throughout the year, I think we're going to be probably in the low range of 3 to 5 or 6% appreciation, just overall. If a house was bought January 1st versus December 31st that year, it might be worth, let's say, 4 or 5% more. So my overall prediction there, 4 or 5% for appreciation in 2023, but it might go through a few different cycles. So I want to also touch on the difference between renting and buying and kind of what it's like to be a renter right now. So rental prices have gone up significantly since the appreciation of property prices. So it's not any better right now to be a renter than it is a buyer. This topic for me hits home. I just think that every single person that should get into home ownership. This is for another video, but the difference between renting and homeowners as far as financially over time is significant. I think it's homeowners are about 42 times more wealthy than lifelong renters. So buying real estate is a good decision. A lot of people try and time the market. And I always tell people it's impossible to actually time the market. It's time in the market. So you may watch this video and say, okay, so the perfect time to buy is maybe right before spring. Maybe, but it's also a good time last spring, the spring before that, the summer, the winter. If you're buying real estate for the right reasons, it is always a good time to buy real estate, because if you have a 10, 20, 30-year outlook, it's always going to do well. And the best part is, between renting and owning a home, is that you're essentially paying yourself every single month. When you're renting, you're paying the landlord and making them rich. When you're owning, you do have a mortgage and you're paying interest, so the bank is making some money too, but you're also paying down your principal. So every single month, you're just owning more and more and more and more of that home. And over time, that home also goes up in value. So as these things happen together, you are becoming more wealthy. So for me, it's an easy answer, no brainer. Home ownership, always better than renting in every scenario if you're investing for the long term. So not if you're gonna be someone for 1 year and you're hoping to make fast cash and you're gonna buy this year, sell next year, and hope the market does good. That's called speculation. But if you're buying real estate for the right reasons and what I teach for long-term wealth building, then it is a good time to buy real estate. And you can't time the market. So when people ask me, is now a good time to buy or should I wait? The answer is almost always, you should buy now. If things get better in a year from now because interest rates are down, you can then refinance your loan to get that lower interest rate. So is it a good time to buy? Absolutely. If I was gonna pick the right time, which again, you can't time the market, I would say early this next year will be a great time to buy. You're probably gonna get your best bang for your buck as far as prices go. I don't think they're gonna fall below. I think the low of prices will be probably just before spring, early this next year. And then I see that prices will go up slowly from there. And then once the interest rates change and get better, you can always refinance. All right, so that's my prediction for 2023. If you have any specific questions about your neighborhood, your house, or anything like that, definitely hit me up. Information's below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.